Before we start the show, just a word from our sponsor, Undeniable Press. For all your screen printing needs, located in the Corktown district of Detroit, Michigan. If you ever need any t-shirts or any other little promo accessories, posters, or whatnot printed up for you, go to Undeniable Press. They're located, once again, in the Corktown district of Detroit, Michigan, and you can reach them at facebook.com/undeniablepressdetroit. And those same guys who do Undeniable Press also have a clothing line called 20 by 20 Apparel. It's very much wrestling themed, all sorts of nostalgic themes in regards to the history of wrestling. And you can go check out their clothing line at 20x20apparel.com. That's the number 20x, the number 20apparel.com. Now let's start the show.
Fresh is the word.
I'm Jim Duggan, got long wood for plenty hoes. I keep it fresher than fresh, but you already know. You suckers bummy, I'm money, I got a ton of flows. My weed loud like a motherfucking thunder roll. Your shit quiet like you ballin' on a budget though. We see your kicks and we laugh and yellin' what are those. You see me shining like a suit on puffy. You know my grindin' shit is too strong, buddy. That's why the dude call money. I be stuntin' like it's nothing at all. Cause it's nothing to me, it's probably something to y'all. Trying to smoke like me, then come and fuck with your dog. Got a closet full of kicks, you can't cop it tomorrow. And I'm fresher than the freshest, you can tell it's in my essence. Bitch, you see the way I'm rapping, yes I do this shit to death. Until I'm running out of breath, or tell somebody cut a check. But either way you know it's fresh, and either way you know it's fresh. Fresh, we fresh. Fresh, 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 goddammit, we fresh. Fresh, goddammit, we so damn.
Welcome to the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier. This is episode 90. It's with a good friend of mine. This week's guest is the Detroit-born and raised DJ and producer, Sinistarr. While his music is centered in drum and bass, Sinistarr definitely flirts with sounds and tempos influenced by a wide array of music that he celebrates. Currently living in Calgary, Sinistarr is enjoying over a decade now of touring as a DJ and releasing a variety of projects on labels around the world. During our interview, we talked about some of his new and upcoming releases, his beginnings, and his progression as a music producer, the current evolution of the drum and bass genre, and all sorts of life lessons as being an independent artist. So let's get to the interview with Sinistarr. Cool, man. It's nice to talk with you, man. I definitely wanted. You're somebody I've always wanted to interview for one reason or another, but it just never happened.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
This is the perfect time, So, you've always been somebody. First off, you're like one of my favorite people to ever come out of Detroit, like the music scene, just as a person.
Thanks, man.
You always been a cool person. Always had his head on straight. You're always have a positive attitude. And then you're on the short list of people that I always look to see who you're playing, who you're listening to, because you always gave me really good recommendations on people out there that are making some good music.
Yeah, thank you.
So I feel like I want to talk about a lot of stuff that you've been working on, just a lot of stories about things that you've done in the past. But I feel like at times, because there's some definitely some questions I need to ask about things that, how you perceive things in the electronic music scene and everything. So at times this interview might turn into electronic music therapy session.
Oh, that's fine. I'm all for that.
All right. So these days, what are you working on these days? Because I know you're always have a release coming out. You've always been sort of under the radar, but always sort of coming out with stuff.
Yeah. Right now I have quite a few things. One of the recent things that came out was a 7-inch for this Italian label called Beat Machine, and that just came out. Do you know Omunet?
Yes.
Yeah, so he did the remix on the other side of that as his other alias. He does footwear, kind of ghetto techy stuff. Is Philip D. Kick.
Yeah.
He did the remix for that. That just came out. I just had something come out today for Do you know Contact, Ethan Holven at all?
Ooh, it sounds familiar.
Okay, he's from Detroit, but he lives in Brooklyn now. But he put out a record on Styles Upon Styles, and yeah, I did a remix for it. He asked me to do a remix, and yeah, that's out today. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I've been doing a bunch of stuff. Like me and Zed Bias have been talking a bit.
Oh
So
yeah, fresh.
yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. And
After all these years, Zed Bias is still putting out amazing shit.
incredible. His new album is just like the best thing walking right now. It's like just the summer everything. Like yeah, Selecta is fire. So yeah. Other than that, I'm working with Stingray still. Like we're still trying to knock some stuff out. Yeah, that's kind of like where I'm at right now. I'm getting ready to go to China in
Ooh.
a couple weeks here. Um, I'm doing a release for they basically have a night in Shenzhen, which is like right across the river from Hong Kong. Um, yeah, they're starting a label and they asked me to do like the first release for it. So I'm gonna be finishing up the second track over the weekend and
Oh, that's
getting
fresh.
that. Yeah, getting that set to go, and then yeah, just getting ready for this trip for Asia.
When did you, first start getting into like making music? What was that, sort of, when did that initial itch come?
High school, definitely. Yeah, like I was like always listening to the radio and always listening to like mix shows and stuff like that. I didn't know the first thing about DJing or anything like that, but I've always been kind of getting into instruments and like playing piano and just being around music. So that just kind of prompted me to see if I could make it. And yeah, like I'd say the first couple years of high school was kind of formative in knowing what I liked, what I wanted to make, and then kind of going from there. Um, yeah, and then it just picked up, and so especially the last couple, I'd say the last half of my high school years, it was definitely about drum and bass and jungle and all that stuff. So I nosedived into that, and then yeah, that was like pretty much it. And then in college, it was like, do I go into, you know, do I make more music or do I keep DJing and that type of stuff? And yeah, I just broke down and like did it. So
Specifically, what was some of the music that you were really into when you first got this itch to start making music?
house and techno specifically. Yeah, I came from that realm, so it was like a lot of the Chicago stuff, like Dust Tracks and Trax Records, and I went to school with Derek May's cousin, um, and he put me onto yeah what Derek was doing a little bit more with like Transmat and all that. He used to give me CDs that Derek would give him, so he just would hand those over. So yeah, I would just sit and listen to those and study those as much as I could.
When did you first start it? Like, what was it about like sort of drum and bass and jungle that got you into it? Who were some of the artists that you were looking up to at that time?
First one was Goldie, and it's funny because didn't listen to Goldie. I saw him on a movie, and I was like, "Who's that dude?" I was like, "This guy's very engaging. Like, I'm interested to see. Like, he's acting like crazy right now." So,
Right.
so I was like, "I need to find out who this is." So I did like a bit of research and all that, and then found out he made music. Heard that, and I was like, this style sounds familiar because I was hearing it, like I was listening to drum and bass and jungle. I just didn't know what it was called. Cats would play it on the radio. You of course you would know, like the cats would play it on radio and stuff like crazy here, and
Right.
in like the ghetto tech sets. But I just knew it as ghetto tech, right? I know it as like there's a name to it, and then looking more into it, and kind of like goes into like an era of like representation, right? Like all the people that were into or making jungle or like founding it, they were all black. So I was like, oh, this is pretty much kind of a parallel universe in a sense. it was like, yeah, it was dope. Like, just witnessing that, it kind of went through the same movement to where it was kind of grassroots, and it just blew up and got bigger and bigger. And then I started to hear a little bit more that London was like influenced by Detroit, and there was like a big bridge there, and yeah, that kind of all fell into play that way. So yeah, it was like Goldie and Fabio and Groove Rider and uh, more recently like D Bridge. Those cats have been like people I've looked up to. So
Didn't you eventually release something on Goldie's label?
yeah, I did in 2011. Yeah, it came out on a 12, and then yeah, pretty much set the pace for whatever I had coming up next.
When you started like kind of doing this deep dive into drum and bass and realizing that like, oh, these are all there's a lot of these black artists that are doing this music. As a black man yourself, man, like how did that feel to see that there's like other black guys doing this type of music, when at the time a lot of the techno and stuff was going this way where there was it was getting more infiltrated by white people and Europeans and stuff like that, when originally it was a black art form?
It felt like I could do it. Because a lot of people, I mean, what was the stereotype, right? Like techno and anything that's not hip hop or R&B was just white people's music.
Right.
And it was like, well, digging deeper, it's like, well, no, it's infinitely black. Like, that's how it started. So yeah, digging into that more, it was just like, and to find out that those people are still around. It's not some sort of like weird legacy where these guys have started it and then a whole different race of people took it over. It was like, no, they're still here and they're still functioning and they're still successful. So it's like, hey, maybe I could do something with that. Yeah.
During this whole journey of like sort of figuring out what you wanted to do in regards to music, was there a time when you just sort of realized, hey, like I could probably do this for a long time?
I think it was after that Metalheads release. That's when it happened. I was like, oh, because I mean, there was a few other layers to that too. Right when I think a few months before that record came out, or no, a year before that record came out, I went and played 4 Metalheads down in Miami, and the night before, Goldie had played, and he ended his set with the tune he signed to 1,000 people in like a room. So I'm sitting there front and center hearing my tune and hearing this guy that 10 years ago I just found out who he was playing that, and I was like, I see where we are now. Yeah, like I see that we can I can keep going with this.
Yeah, it must have been like an amazing sort of full circle feeling that happened at that time.
Oh yeah, I was balling. I was definitely crying. I was definitely lost it. I was like, wow. I don't think I've ever had that situation, or I've never felt that overwhelmed, like for anything else. But that particular moment, I was like, wow, like I did that.
I feel like all these years that you've been putting out records, like in comparison to other people that have come from here in Detroit, like you've like sort of had this sort of unique path where it's been very under the radar, but at the same time you're very well respected amongst the people that would be your peers in all these releases. Sort of how do you feel you were able to go through all of that and just sort of continue on having release by release without sort of overhyping yourself?
Just to keep working, keep my head down, like just keep knocking stuff out, keep making things, keep talking to people. Networking is kind of like a big deal for me. Just to be in the same room as someone and not talk to them is kind of strange. Or to just talk about yourself so much. So I would like to, to get to know the other person, and then we find out that, we know the same people and so on and so forth. And
yeah, you're really good at that. You're really good at talking with people.
Yeah, it's just a natural thing. I just was like, hey, oh, you're here? All right, cool. So yeah, like I said, lots of focus. I think lots of discipline on that. So it's like I can go out, talk to people, or stay home. People were telling me about a million shows tonight, even being in Detroit, and I was like, I am home. It is the weekend, but I gotta work on some music, so I'm gonna stay home and do that. So yeah, and also help too, like me being at home. Um, the airport's like 10 minutes away, so if I'm traveling out, then yeah, my main focus is getting ready and then taking the quick hop, skip, and a jump to the airport.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I feel like with like a lot of the music that you do, it really isn't sort of tied down to one genre. When you kind of think of, there's a lot of people that sort of hop on from wave to fad, sort of leave a style that they were doing behind in the past, and then they might come back to it later. But it just seems like they're like riding a bunch of different waves. But you just kind of like keep it loose. What's your idea about the music that you make?
I try to make it a mix of things. When it's like, be it arrangement or uh, melodies and so on and so forth. And I try to keep it around the music that I listen to, like since I've been listening to music. um, so it's been like, lots of house, techno, hip hop, jungle, drum and bass. And that's like, you can mix all those together. If you take or if you take two out of the five I mentioned and then try to make something out of that, you can make something. So, and they've all been around for a really, really long time. So there's tons of things that you can pull from or tons of things that you can get inspired by. So, yeah, that's like kind of how I keep everything fresh and keep everything moving. So, yeah, but that's like more or less like how I think about things without giving too much away, obviously.
Like you mentioned earlier, you're going to be going to China. You do a release there. You've
Yep.
done releases and played at parties everywhere. Like, why do you think these places like to book you? What is it about you that in your music do you feel like adds to what they're trying to do?
Um, that's a good question. I don't know, but you know, I'm making what I make truthfully and without, yeah, any BS. So, you know, I guess they pay attention to that, so it's good.
Yeah, you seem like a person who's like easy to work with. Like, and I know you said that networking is very important to you. How important is it to just like be easy to work with, but still, make sure all the business is take care of properly.
Well, you got to make the business easy too. Definitely have to make the business easy. Even like one big thing too is like bookings, right? Like for DJ sets and stuff like that. Um, it's interesting because I have, I guess the scene for especially the U.S. like drum and bass scene, they don't really adhere to agents. Like they don't like booking agents a lot. If they do, they'll go to like the top tier ones that these guys have been around for 20 years. They automatically assume that they have an agent and go there, right? So some of the people that are kind of new and et cetera, you try to approach them with that, and they freak out. They're like, "Yo, like I'm not shady." I'm like, "Yo, no, it's not like that." I'm like, "I'm actually like really busy and I can't handle this myself." So, like, I have a person that deals with that, and yeah, it's a lot easier that way. But, yeah, I think handling that, or at least having somebody that's easy to work with, having someone on my team that's easy to work with is very important. So.
For any up and coming DJs who find themselves with opportunities outside their own city to travel to DJ, what advice would you have to them? What sort of obstacles always kind of sort of present themselves?
Get rest. Yeah, get sleep. Do that. Drink water. Yeah, those are two really big ones. I would say try to keep an open mind too, because you never know where you might end up. And yeah, if it's, you know, if it turns out to be kind of weird, or if it turns out to be the best time ever, it's like the fact that you walked in not knowing what to expect is a good thing. Yeah.
For anybody who's like who's also, just starting out with, playing around with making beats or making music, what sort of advice do you have to them towards, where they should go in regards to just sort of finding their sound?
Um, that's a great question. Um, I don't know. I've tried to look everywhere. Try to see, read a lot. I read a lot. I like, I listen to music constantly. I've been keeping like a music journal. So anytime I hear anything, I like write it down. So I'm like, I can like reference it later if I want to like listen to something or go down a rabbit hole with music and stuff. And yeah, just try to document as much as you can, honestly. Um, if you're like writing music or if you're even DJing, like keep a list of things, things that work together or things that might just inspire you. So find inspiration.
When you were sort of coming up, was there anybody that sort of acted as sort of a mentor towards you? And if so, like, what did you learn from that person?
The two people I know that put me on the most were from Toronto. Um, One of them went by Mutt, and the other one went by Gremlins, and those two were, yeah, they basically started sending my music out to like everybody, and they were already in big positions anyway. Mutt was with Fabio and Groove Rider and all those guys. Well, on Fabio's label, he put out this drum and bass track called Hot Lick Squeeze. It was R.I.P. J Dilla. That was the name of the tune.
Okay.
And basically had a hip hop intro, and then went into drum and bass, and then yeah, that was like I have to send it to you. It's an incredible tune, but that's how I first got a hold of him, and then I started hearing more, and it was like samples, and they were like samples and all sorts of stuff, just from really really popular hip hop tunes, and yeah, he flipped things like I've never like heard before, and then like Gremlins was on the more jungle and like uh, kind of darker drum and bass tip.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was listening to a lot of that at the time. So and then I think Gremlins came and played. He played at Necto for New Year's. It was like 2006, and that was the time I was like, you know what, I need to start like making this stuff. And so I just gotten in touch with them, and yeah, I started sending him things, and they just pretty much, they enjoyed it, and they started sending it out to everybody. So I looked up to those two pretty much. I try to stay in touch with them as much as I can. So yeah, early on, that was definitely the two people I was like, yeah, you two have helped me out like exponentially.
How important is it to sort of have those people that are a part of like the music scene to sort of have that sort of sense of community with them? How important do you feel that is?
Really important, because you can't do it by yourself. Like it's not. A lot of people can say that, but I mean, I make the music myself. You know what I mean? Like, but to have a second ear, a second opinion, or like, a person be like, nah, I don't like that. Not yes men or anything. It's like I can't send my stuff out to like everybody, because they'll be like, oh, it's sick. And I'm like, that's not what I'm looking for.
Right.
It's like, yo, I need someone to be like, hey, can you fix these, you need to fix these drums, or get rid of that melody, or like do something like that, or like, hey, this needs a new mix down, even on some like rudimentary stuff like that. So it's like, yo, you need to just make it sound better. Yeah, so you need people like that around, like as much as you can, to keep you on your feet, and you have to trust them. And I try to trust people that I have, not only a good rapport with, but like that make really good music, or I feel make really good music. So yeah, you get to bounce it off of them, or yeah, try to build from there. So
gear-wise, what do you use to make your music?
I'm kind of in the box right now with the laptop. I've got my little sound card because I travel so much, so I'm like pretty mobile. Um, yeah, and then usually when I'm back here, I have my DX100 here with me. I've got like a Mackie, like my Mackie setup, Tascam mixer, stuff like that. Just really basic setup to knock out some things and then get some mix downs together. So yeah, yeah, I like using a lot of handheld items, a lot of like handheld drum machines and like um, little like ribbon synthesizers. I don't know, there's something. It makes me feel like I'm playing video games. Yeah, but I'm messing with like synths and stuff. So yeah, a lot of records been made off of like just messing around with yeah regular synths and stuff, or just handheld synths and things. So yeah.
All right, this is where like the first part of like my electronic music therapy is coming in right now.
Okay.
Okay, for a while I've DJ'd here in Detroit, here and there, whatever. And after a while, I just got really bored with it because I was just like doing these hip hop shows, and I'm just kind of bored with it. So I was trying to figure out what I want to do next, and if I want to do something next, I got to be able to have fun with it,
Right.
So like I always like wanted to at least just kind of like sort of make my own stuff, play around with beats or whatever.
Right.
So here's where my frustrations come in. Okay, recently I did buy the Machine Micro too.
Okay.
So I have one of those, and in sort of like I've like started like checking out tutorials and stuff. Here's where my problem comes in. I feel like a lot of the tutorials, even as basic it is, comes from an idea where people have an idea of the type of sounds and instruments that they want to use. And then when you go in there, there's like a ton of already preloaded shit in there.
Yeah.
And it's overwhelming to so for someone like me who's very frustrated now about where to start in regards to the sounds to use, what the hell should I do?
Start building your own library. Like, make a bunch of folders, like kicks. Make a folder that says drums, right?
Yeah.
And then just throw a bunch of drums in there. Make a folder that says synths. Throw a bunch of synths in there. Like, make a folder that says effects. Throw a bunch of effects in there. Anything you find on the internet, or like sample packs, or like things you buy. You can buy sample packs, all that stuff. Just build your own library.
Or first. Should I just sample from records and stuff like that?
Do that. Do it. Like, get some samples. Like, yeah, throw it into a folder. Like, just make sure everything's like separate, and then you can go down the line and start building off the stuff. And if you find things that you can find samples you like a lot easier than flipping through thousands of preloaded samples and effects and things like that. So, I mean, and then later on down the line, you can take a look at those. But I mean, how I did it or how I learned was just how to build your own library, just figure it out from there.
Yeah, because that was like the one thing I'm just like, okay, I'm seeing all these things in the tutorial to sort of learn how to use it, but I'm like, there's all this fucking shit preloaded in there, and I don't know what I want to use.
It's daunting, man. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Like, even with the machine. I mean, I love using mine. Like, I have an MK1, but yeah, like when you load it up, it like has the whole arrangement and all that. Yeah, it can get daunting, but I'd say the best thing to do is definitely find as many sounds as you can and just build your own library, and then mess with those sounds, and then start getting into the other styles of or the other presets or packs or whatever. So
right. When you first started learning, were you trying to emulate anything that already existed, or were you just kind of like dicking around with sounds and stuff?
I was definitely trying to like make styles that emulated the records that I was playing. So when I was making house and techno, or when I was playing house and techno, I was trying to make house and techno and do little edits here and there. And then when I got into drum and bass, or when I mentioned Mutt and Gremlins, like those are the two people I was like really looking at, especially Mutt, because he was doing the sample thing, and I was like listening to tons of hip hop at the time, And I just learned how to like flip samples, and and find the right sample that would sound good over a jungle break, or sound good over like a hip hop beat or things like that. And so so basically I just kind of built it from there, and yeah, it turned into, samples turned into tunes, and tunes turned into releases, and yeah, so on and so forth.
Yeah, shit happened.
Yeah, it happened. Yeah, it happened.
For a long time, you've always been someone who's always sort of recommended me like really cool shit that like maybe I wouldn't normally like get around to seeing like in like your regular places. And a lot of it's been like sort of like drum and bass stuff or stuff adjacent to it. What I love, and I was telling you this at the Movement Festival, is I love that shit right now where it's like these guys that come from a drum and bass background taking the drum and bass elements but making like sort of the hip hop type stuff, beat type stuff. I love that shit.
Yeah, man. That's like, and it's funny because of the people that I know that, that I mentioned to you, like Ivy Lab and Alex Perez and all those guys. They all came from drum and bass. So like straight from Ivy Lab, I've been writing music with for like 8 years straight. Like we put out records and stuff like that. We did a thing for Lacoste for the shoe, and like we like made the track, and then it came on this little USB that came with the label that put it out had a limited edition shoe, and yeah, we did that, and we did a couple other releases, and they were just like, yeah, they were hype on it. So for him to switch over to that style was not surprising because he was always big into hip hop, and we always used to trade like other styles of music. And he used to put me on to stuff, and I used to put him on to things. I used to teach him about Detroit, really, and put him onto like some kind of Detroit deep cuts. May not be deep cuts to a Detroiter, but it's definitely a deep cut to like a Londoner. So yeah, and then Alex Perez is another one too, and that was kind of a big inspiration. Not so much kind of musically, but he was young when he came, like when he like broke through. And I was like pretty young at the time. I think my first record was I was 22. Yeah, so that was like the big kind of motivation. Like, hey, he's your age, or he's close, so you can do it. You can definitely do this.
Drum and bass was always sort of like one of those genres that was like one of those like underground movements that most of the time never really got to respect that the artist wanted, and sometimes a lot of the purists of it can be a little bit much about what comes and goes into it. But when you have artists like Ivy Lab and Alex Perez and stuff like that, sort of progressing it into these different forms, do you think that was a much needed change for the genre?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different subgenres of drum and bass and jungle that a lot of people don't necessarily know about, and now the new one is called halftime, so that's like the new style of it. And I think it was definitely needed. As with any like scene or any like style or any subgenre like that, it's gonna get sort of oversaturated. But at the same time, there's still like a good gatekeeper. There's still good gatekeepers involved that are like putting out or kind of setting the bar for like everything. So for a lot of people to look at. Those guys are definitely the top of the benchmark on that. They set the precedent constantly. So it's not, I guess for drum and bass, there's a lot of I don't know how to put it. I would say, gatekeepers as well, but it needs to be kind of watched a little bit more, because there's like, and it doesn't open up the field as much to new talent. I think as of recently it's been happening. But yeah, beforehand it's just been like, yo, you know, you're this artist A is, you know, A-list artists are up here, and then if you're new, like, good luck. So yeah.
See, and that was a part of the electronic music therapy session that I wanted to bring up, and you actually kind of brought it up. Is like, and you brought the word gatekeeper. Is that for a long time I felt like something specifically with the drum and bass is that like sometimes when you have like these gatekeepers specifically on maybe a local level
Yeah.
that they can be a little bit much, a little bit
little lot.
like too negative about shit.
Yeah.
And it almost is a bit off-putting to people that want to sort of dip their toes into it or even just
Right.
enjoy the scene. And it's just a little off-putting. And I'm like, am I crazy? Is it just me, or is this something that actually exists?
No, this is like everywhere. There's always that one person that's like, or you know, like I'll be DJing and somebody's like heckling me to play jungle or play drum and bass, and it's like, yeah, I'm getting to that. I'm like, how would you calm down and sit over there? So yeah, there's always that person. There's always that one person that's just like, oh, you know, this isn't the real sound. This isn't real that or the other. And it's like you ask them if they put out a record, or you know, played a gig out of state, or you know, done a radio interview or done an interview like this talking about your discography or your whole like trajectory. It's like no, they won't. They don't have anything to say. You know, like they've been around for a long time, and I always respect that. You know, but I always have like utmost respect for that because they were before me, and I pay attention to that and I recognize that. But you're not making that. You're not making this inclusive. You know, like this dance music's supposed to be like for everybody. It's like you're making records or you're playing records or whatever. It's like if you wanna, I feel like if you wanna, you know, be like that, it's like you might as well just be playing in your bedroom and complaining on the internet about it. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
How do you sort of like swim those waters if you're somebody that like sort of feels like, hey, in my city, like this scene doesn't seem inclusive, but I want to do what they're doing. You know, how do you swim those waters?
Um, I still try to stay in my lane, honestly. Like, there's only so much you can tell them. There's only so much you can like, you know, there's only so much you can give, or so much of yourself you can give to that particular scene. So, um, yeah, without obviously stepping on toes, or not even stepping on toes, just like, I don't know, just being able to stand on your own feet and, you know, say, hey, like, I'm doing this, that, and the other, you know, like, let's all cohabitate. But yeah, it's interesting to swim. There's a lot of I guess where I am now, especially in being in Calgary, like it's a big festival scene. You know, people are basically making music and kind of like getting their footing to play these festivals. They're not necessarily, I mean, they're not necessarily playing out of the country, but they're playing, yeah, these things. They're traveling around and doing that. Probably going to like other countries, maybe, but for the most part, yeah, it's interesting to swim those waters, as you said, uh, mainly because yeah, you're just trying to find your own voice, and then you know make sure you're not. I don't know. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, like how do you like sort of find your own voice while trying to find that lane where you'll find fans and get acceptance somewhere.
Um, yeah, you just said I do it.
Just do it.
In the words of Big Sean, I do it. Yeah, you just do it and then see what happens. Really, like I can't really say I've done this like not. I haven't done it strategically to where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make this, that, and the other. These people will like it. I will be everywhere. You know, it's not like finding it. It's like developing it. You know, it's like oh, you know, I just build like. You know, I'll make a tune or two, send it around, test it out, and I never know. You know, even early on when I was making like liquid drum and bass and all of that, the people I least expected to like certain things like ended up loving it and like putting it out. So it's like, oh, okay. Like even like my Metalheadz release was a big one. It was like, you know, the tune was like didn't sound like anything that was on the label at the time, and Goldie loved it. So I was like, hey, here we are. Yeah, I was. Yeah, I didn't pay attention to so much trying to gain acceptance, but it was just like, hey, I'm making music. Like, check this out. So,
Sort of in like the realms of electronic music these days, how do you feel like is the best way for people to get their name out there to people when like we've gotten to a point where, you know, stuff online is being sort of bogged down with new algorithms where you have to pay to get placement on certain platforms and stuff. In certain circumstances, we're going back to the old days of streetwise marketing and flyering and having to have a street presence. Sort of. What's your idea of what you need to do these days to get your name out there?
So it's funny that you actually mentioned flyering and street teaming. I used to do that when I was about 16, but it wasn't for like raves or anything like that. It was for movies and for different things. I just got interested in it. I was like, how do I? Because I was the first movement I went to was like 2002, and yeah, I just got like so enthralled with that. I'm like, yo, how do I figure this out? Like, how do I get involved in like, a scene? I really like this music, and I definitely want to like know more and be kind of on the cusp of what's coming out. So one of the things that were offered by a lot of the labels were being a part of a street team. And so I just did my little internet research, looked up some street teams, and then went from there. So that's kind of like how I built my whole networking thing. And there's this site called Soulcool, Soulkool, and it was basically a guerrilla marketing firm out of New York. And they did stuff like Cowboy Bebop the movie. They did one of the Diesel Boy CDs. But I was like part of the team, right? And I was the one that handled this area, essentially this region of of their marketing. So they hit me up and they're like, hey, can you send this out? MySpace, da da da. So I did it that way. So to like answer your question, I would say try to network with people not so much post everything all the time. I'm on Twitter, but I post like really stupid quips and things like that, like whatever. But just try to talk to people as much as you can and send them music. Don't try to play this isn't out, this isn't released. Like, you may have their ear for like 2 seconds, and while you have that ear, like, just send them as much as you can. Like, DJ Shadow hit me up like sometime last year, and I was just like, you know what, like, here's a folder. You like this tune? Okay, here's a folder. I'm like, I still have yet to hear back from him, but I'm sure he'll get around to it. And when he does, then that's that. So I mean, but the fact that he heard something from me, and I was able to at least reach out to him and say, hey, here's more. That's what it's about, really. Just like networking, kind of building that realm. So for anyone that's like wanting to get more into it, I would just say, talk to people, talk to everybody. You never know.
I heard this really interesting idea on this other podcast. This DJ had this idea where, in regards to networking, the stuff that you were saying to send, people tracks and everything, where they were like, when you meet other DJs, send them a track that they can use, that will sound like something that they can use, or even rework one of their tracks. So it'd be something different that they can do during their set, and it was a very interesting, even if you have to make something on the spot after you meet the person, Like make something that they can that's in your vein, but something that they can use. And I always felt like that was an interesting take on networking.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting way of looking at it. I remember doing a couple things like that where I was like, hey, I'm gonna, take certain parts out of this tune, make an edit, and et cetera, et cetera. But that was like way early on. Now I can like, if I do a remix, it's like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. It's like I'm taking it in my vein and then sending it back to them, But yeah, for the most part, early on, I would definitely. I mean, that's great remixing, like skill or great remixing training. You're taking like a different version. You're making a different version out of it. But yeah, that's a real interesting way of like looking at that. I've never really like heard that. To where it's like, hey, rework something and send it back to them. Because sometimes if you do that, yeah, people get mad. People get real angry. Like, yeah, there's yeah. I'm not gonna elaborate too much into that, but yeah.
Right, I know. When I heard it, I was like, I know some people get mad when people do that.
Oh yeah.
But I think if you already have sort of like if you meet this person, talk to them, and already have some sort of rapport to it, then it might go over a lot better,
Yeah, definitely.
I don't mean like cold sending people, remixes of their tracks.
Okay. Yeah. So if you're cold sending people, I mean, if you're sending to the original person first, that's fine. But if you're like caning it, putting your mixes, people playing on the radio, and then that's that person's like tune,
Right.
It could be, it could be touchy.
Right, that can be touchy, but no, the idea of that advice was like to send it directly to the person that originally made it, and it's for them to use, and it'd be like, certain sort of, it would be just sort of like a new take on their stuff that they can use in their set.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like that's yeah. I mean, I've definitely done edits and send those off to people. I'm like, hey, I didn't edit this tune at this tempo. Like, I know you don't play this tempo, but I wanted to like be able to play it in my sets and so on and so forth. And yeah, that's gone over quite well actually. But yeah, I thought you meant sending stuff off, like just be like, hey, check out this edit that I did. Yeah. No.
Right.
Don't do that.
No, I know all that stuff can be a little bit like touchy and
annoying.
annoying.
I snooped through like SoundCloud and like do like a search for my name or whatnot just to see if I missed anything. And yeah, I did the sample pack a while back, and it was with Teddy MC, and in the sample pack it has his name on the sample, like on the samples, right? Like, but they kept like people that would use the vocal samples would put my name on it. So then I'd be hearing these like weird edits of like my tune, or these weird edits, either my tune or like their tune, and it says my name on it. Like I like collaborated with them on it. I'm like, what is going on? And then I hear the vocal. I'm like, no, it's wrong. I don't want to message like each and every single person and be like, hey, this is not me. This is Teddy MC.
Right, that's like in the hip hop shit when like somebody like raps over like a Dilla beat and then labels it produced by J Dilla.
Yeah, and I'm like, yo, yeah, we know, A. B, did you like get permission, or did you just wanted to? Are you doing this for clout? Like, come on, like we know you like real hip hop, but relax.
Right, there's a difference between like produced by J Dilla than saying this track is called so and so and it's over the Raise It Up beats.
Yeah,
say that.
Do it like that. It's like, oh, cool, like or just like don't even like list it. Just like drop the beat and then rap over it. People know what Raise It Up is.
Right.
Like, just play the tune. Just spit.
Well, all these people go out of the way saying produced by J Dilla, or produced by Just Blaze, or whatever. I'm like, no, you're just rapping over one of their instrumentals. It's not produced.
We know. Like, been known that. Get out of here.
Get the fuck out of here. All right, you mentioned before that you know, you definitely, you know, had some starts, you know, from those guys in Toronto, and then these days you've been staying in Vancouver. You know, Canada's been, you know, a good part of your career. What's been, you know, sort of the feel of, you know, living in Canada, working in Canada, you know, playing in Canada. You know, what sort of vibe you've been getting off of it?
There's a lot of bass music, especially in the West. So I'm with familiar ears, very familiar ears. So be it they're listening to dubstep, they're listening to footwork, they're listening to like jungle, listening to drum and bass. It's like here in Detroit, but like with bass music. Like, and there's way more festivals. And they have a big sound system out there called PK, and PK is started in Calgary. I'm actually in Calgary, not in Vancouver.
Oh,
But
okay, Calgary. Okay.
I go to Vancouver all the time. So same
Yeah,
here.
I always seem like you're always in Vancouver. So
I'm always there. So it's not even like, yeah, I can't even be like, oh, it's actually Calgary. Uh, yeah. So that crew, like PK, is out of Calgary, and they outfit literally all of Western Canada, like in terms of like bass bins and everything, and their sound is loud.
that's a sound system that that Excision uses on tour, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah,
That's them.
that shit
So,
crazy, man.
Yeah, that's their whole rig. Like I played on, I'm talking 100-person venue with that rig. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, man. Like the bar owner's like, yeah, I love this stuff. I put pieces of tape underneath the bottle so they don't shake off when the bass is hitting. I'm like, wow, like, this is insane. So yeah, there's like tons of that style of music happening. And like I said, there's festivals to match those, and they bring out not only people that I haven't heard of, or they brought out people that I work with, and I get to see them and get to hang out with them, and build up our either collaborative schedule or make FaceTime. Some of these people I'm meeting for the first time, I've talked to them in I've talked to them for like 10 years. I'm like finally meeting them in person. So yeah, it's dope. It's like nice being up there, like I said, around familiar ears. They know what's up.
Right, right. What do you think? And I like to always kind of ask this when I interview people. What is it that you feel like is about your life or career in music that people could sort of extract out of your story, any lessons, and sort of put it into their life, learn from it?
Don't give up at all. That's like the big one. That's like, and just keep working, because just look at where you were a certain number of years back and go, do I want to go back to that position? Like, do I want to be there? No. So yeah, for me it was like, I was here at my parents. I was kind of like working job here, job there, and then trying to finish school and all that stuff. So it's like, after school, it was like, okay, what do I do now? Do I like keep making more music, or do I keep like building and stuff like that? It was a very lost place, and even like I could say right now, I'm going through like a big transitional kind of period with my music. I mean, not in a bad way, but in a very, very, like a really good way. It's like more in the sense of like, hey, I'm 11 years in, like I made all these records, like, and my phone's ringing hard. It's like, where do I want to go back to? Kind of like twiddling my thumbs and figuring out what's going on, or do I jump in this head first? So it's like I'm on a cliff and the water's like right below. Water's like right open and clear, no rocks. It's like nice and deep. I can swim up, get my bearings, and then climb up that cliff again. So yeah, get a little deep. To a little deep there, but yeah, that's like kind of where I'm at with it. It's like, you just don't stop. Just it's weird to me when people say, oh, I'm quitting music. I'm gonna quit music. It's like, well, you can't. One, it's like impossible.
Right. It's always in there. It's always like
It's always,
you're always thinking about it.
even my barber yesterday, he made this track, and I loved it. And he was like, it was like a ghetto techie track, and he was talking about how people recognized it and all that. And one thing he said that was like really cool was like, yeah, I don't really like, I haven't pursued it as much, but I'm like always making stuff. Like I'm always making music. And yeah, he's doing good as a barber. He's doing great as a barber. He's crushing it. But like for the fact that he was like, yeah, I'm not gonna give up music completely. And that was the one thing I said to him. I was like, yeah, you can't quit music. He's like, yeah, man, I know. That's like, yeah. Anyone that says that, it's like, well, you're gonna come back. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen with like huge names too. They're just like, oh, we're calling it quits. Take a break. Yeah, take a break always, but even during that break, you're gonna find something that you're gonna inspire you, or at least make you get back to work. Not so much inspiration. Yeah, and I said find inspiration earlier, and I was just like, wait, no, inspiration's for amateurs. Get back to work. Yeah.
No, and I think that whole idea of just you never quit, even if you're not pursuing it, you're still doing it.
Yeah.
I think people still need to understand that that's important.
Yep, exactly. Like don't make it seem like it's like this daunting task. It's like you're literally sitting down and putting sounds together or putting ideas together, Like think of it as like a notepad as much as not as much as like I'm gonna make this fully polished and release master and gonna hit all these charts and da 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 da. It's like nah, just make stuff and the rest will happen.
Yeah, because everybody's sort of, everybody's different, and I just like to always, I want to sort of get rid of that sort of stigma that it doesn't matter what the art is, it doesn't, you don't necessarily have to pursue it in the same way as another person pursues it. If you're making it, that's what counts.
Yeah, because if you try, like, that person's already ahead of you, right? That person's always going to be a step ahead of you, no matter what. Even the people I look up to, I'm like, hey, we ended up on the same labels, but it's like, yo, they were on it before you were. They were young before you were.
Yeah.
Basically, like, so it's like, what competition is like? Like, that's not a competition to have. It's like you are here to like develop your own lane, especially if you're making music. There's so many musicians out there. There's so many people that are like still traveling the world and like playing these festivals and all that stuff, but they're doing it in their own space, in their own like type of movement. There are people that kind of click up and have their own groups and do their own collaborative efforts, but it's like power in numbers type of situation. But at the same time, each one of those people can break off and do their own thing. My favorite is Empire of the Sun, and well, somewhat related because it is electronic music. The band themselves does like rock and et cetera, et cetera. The guitarist is on DFA. I think the drummer and the bassist do a house music thing together, and they played in Michigan before.
Okay.
And I think the drummer, yeah, I think one of the other guys, I think those three have their own projects, and then the two singers are obviously the frontmen for the band. But yeah, they all have their own separate projects going on, and their projects are really good, and they're like exceptional, But they know like they can work together, but they can still create their own lanes. So that's important.
Right, and if you're someone who's not necessarily comfortable yet with pursuing it, but just wants to make stuff, you never know at one time coming up, something just might work out, and the stars align, and things start to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, looking back at like 11 years now, like another friend of mine. Actually, it's another friend of mine from Michigan. You remember Greg Samorthix?
Sounds familiar.
Okay, he does liquid drum and bass too, and he's still out here. Like he's still traveling around. He goes to Europe constantly and goes and lives out there and tours and et cetera, et cetera. But he was another person that was like, I went to his house. He used to live like maybe a 15-20 minute drive from me here in Ipsy. And yeah, I used to go to his and just like get tips from him, get pointers and things like that. And yeah, one day he was like, "Hey," once he started hearing my music, he was like, "Hey, you should send it to this label." I told him about you, so I just did, and that was it. That was like the start of it. And yeah, it's just a matter of time. Like you just can't like, don't force it, you know?
Right.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I always like to end my interviews with the same question, and I gave it to you ahead of time to think about it. And that question is, who is somebody that's been a part of your life or career that I could realistically interview, and they would have some great stories and lessons to talk about?
Yeah, uh, recently I would definitely say Joe Nice. You should talk to Joe Nice for sure. He has, yeah, I just met him last year at this festival called Bass Coast, which is actually happening well, at the time of, yeah, at the time we're doing this, it starts next week, July 6th, July
Okay.
6th through 8th. So he's going back there to play, and yeah, he's like dubstep. Like he's the one that brought like the first wave of like the classic dubstep artists to the United States. And yeah, he's a really awesome dude. He's got tons of stories to talk about, and like from travel to running his label. We did a talk actually for this conference out in Alberta or out in Calgary. Um, yeah, and we just talked for an hour about us and about what he's into and what he's been doing. I'll have to send it to you. And yeah, it was really dope. So yeah, he's a great choice, especially right now in terms of who's around me. Definitely the brightest and loudest voice in the room.
See that sort of first wave of dubstep, the OG shit that came from the UK, like
Yeah,
that stuff like meant so much to me. It was so exciting to me.
yeah,
Like that was like some of the stuff that I was kind of first getting into once I was branching off past like hip hop stuff. And I
for
was like,
sure.
this shit is so cool, man. It's so grimy and dirty. And then a lot of if you listen to all that shit right now, 10 to 15 years later, it still sounds fresh.
Yeah, exactly. It's still new. It still has that timeless sound to it, which is funny. Like I didn't, and like full disclaimer, like I don't know a lot of dubstep, so it's like, people teaching me stuff constantly, or people showing me stuff constantly. Like I told you about the five kind of genres that I listen to, and try to stay within that realm. But then all of dubstep is like pulling from those five things.
Right.
So it's like, yeah. So I'm like I said, I'm still learning and kind of like learning about who's who, and I've seen some artists move from like drum and bass and go into dubstep, and yeah, they've been quite successful, and they've been making great music. It's even if they were making drum and bass before, even and that stuff was great. They switched over and did something else, and yeah, they're still moving along with it. So, and being friends with Joe, it's been a good like teaching experience. Um, Listening to his stuff, and while he be playing, he like plays on. He cuts acetates basically. He cuts dub plates, and yeah, I would like run up to him like, "What is that?" And he's like, "Look here." He'd hand me the sleeve, like has it written on the sleeve. It's like, there's that. So, and it turned out to be like a friend of mine. I'm like, oh shit. I can go like, yeah, I can go hit him up and be like, give me that tune. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it, but I want to listen to it. It's sick.
Right. I remember back then, I think I just happened to like catch some stuff online, but I think my first real education of a lot of the stuff actually came from Tad Mullenix.
Yeah,
I remember I was interviewing him around 2004, 2005 ish for his 2-3 album,
yeah,
and when I left his crib, he just gave me a bunch of like mix CDs, and a couple of them were like just straight up dubstep like mix CDs from. I don't think he did them. I think they were just from like some of like the major crews at that time, and I was like, this shit is fucking fantastic, man.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with it after that.
Yeah, they had their ear to the ground to that proper. And, listening like Tad do that and Todd do that, I was just like, yo. And like I said, it was so, they either, if they're making it, that's amazing. If they're playing it, like, I'm just all ears. It's just like, I'm not looking for track listings or anything like that. It's like, yo, it's just good. I just trust them. I trust their judgment on their, from the start to the finish of the mix. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, when cats like, Tad and Todd, like, dude, they just find like the craziest, just underground type jungle drum and bass shit.
Yep.
And I'm like, sometimes I remember one time, they had posted the recording of one of Todd Osborne's sets from Movement. And,
Yeah.
And there was this one part it was blowing my mind. So I just happened to have it on my iPod and I ran into him. I'm like, dude, what is all of this? And it was like 10 minutes long of him playing like 5 straight Current Value tracks.
Nice.
And I was just like, but he mixed like 5 in a row in 10 minutes, and it was just like crazy. And I'm just like, then I went and listened to all the Current Value stuff, and I'm like, dude, this guy is crazy, man. And that was just a whole other like Pandora's box that opened for me.
Yep.
Like
and,
all that weird shit.
Yeah, a friend of mine from Kalamazoo, for those that are listening, it's it's basically the other side of Michigan when you're heading towards Chicago.
Right.
He went by Spectrum, and he was good friends with Current Value, and he was actually signed. That was another person too. It's like all the inspirations are coming out, talking about all of them. He was I think about 2 years younger than me. He's 2 years younger than me, and he had a couple records out, and then we met at Movement when Diesel Boy and Photek and all those guys were playing. I think it was 2007, and we just were randomly standing next to each other. I was like, hey, what's up? Like, you're here, what's good? Like, we exchanged info, and then we ended up at some weird mansion party that night, and then we ended up all going to the same place, and we just stayed in touch, and went from there. And he's been a good friend of mine ever since. So it's like that was all his wave, and he got me into it. So I'm with you on the Current Value. It's so good. Like, it's still good to this day. Like, I'll be looking through my files, and I'll just find it randomly and just put it on, just sit there and like zone out. I'm like, yeah.
Right. And these days I listen to what's the Noisier Radio podcast, their weekly show, and they've been playing recent Current Value stuff, and it's still dope.
Yep, it's still dope. He just put out something on Doc Scott's label, 31, which is like awesome, because this is the Current Value that was like, they used to call it pots and pans, but I don't call it that. It's dope music. It's very dope. Like, very well placed. It had a techno industrial sound to it, or like a metal sound to it, and for him to like do that and then go to do like a whole EP for Doc Scott, like that's prolificness in its finest form for sure.
Cool. Before we get out of here, what are some of the like the good sort of drum and bass or like drum and bass adjacent labels these days?
Well, shouts to the big plug, Exit.
Yeah, Exit's dope.
Exit's dope. Like, I not even saying that like, because I'm on it. It's saying that like I've been listening to them, or I was listening to D-Bridge's like label, him when he was doing Bad Company and all that, and I found out about Exit, and I was like, yo, this sounds, very, it had a Detroit sound to it. And funny enough, because his brother is.
Who's his brother?
Steve Spacek.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah. So it was one of the first tunes I heard was this tune called Last Straw that has Spacek on it, but I didn't put two and two together because I knew SpaceX stuff, but I knew D-Bridge stuff, but I thought they were just like, hey, let's make a tune together, throw some vocals on it. And no, that's his blood brother. Yeah, so like, that was really inspirational for me, and it helped me kind of like it taught me to be different being on Exit, or just like listening to Exit, everything that there were no two tunes that were like similar on like any of those releases. So that was a big one. Who's really, really popping right now? That I'm playing a ton of. That's interesting. Like in terms of, yeah, you're talking. Oh, 2020, obviously.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's like the label somewhere, so it sounds strange. But at the same, like I believe in all of these labels, so it's like, yeah, like I said, Ivy Lab, what they're doing right now. I saw it coming. I could say it that way. I definitely saw it coming with them because I knew
yeah,
all
definitely. You were telling me about them years ago, man.
Yeah, I knew about them separately. Like they were saying, "Hey, we're getting into this new sound. Check it out." And I was like, "This is really dope. You're really onto something." And here they are. They're like top of the game in general, top of the food chain. Yeah. Yeah, that was like pretty much it. Like I'm just in terms of that in drum and bass adjacent too. There's Fresh Moon out of San Antonio. There's Free Love Digi out of like Arizona. There's a lot of like cool American labels that are doing some really dope stuff. There's like Worst Behavior in like New York with like this lady Anna Morgan and Isabel, or this other lady Isabel that's like running all of it. And yeah, they just had a show out with like Mom Dance and like I think Stars and a bunch of other people played. And yeah, it was dope. Like a lot of this, there's a lot of crossover happening, and yeah, it's nice to see that.
Awesome, man. It's been great talking with you, man, like always. Before we get out of here, if anybody wants to listen to your stuff, purchase anything, get more information about Sinistarr, where can they go?
You can Google me. 100%. You can literally Google Sinistarr. Everything's up there. I'm on Twitter, Facebook. I'm on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes. You name it, like I'm on it, basically. Friendster, like LimeWire, BearShare, Kazaa, 6 Degrees.
What Friendster?
Friendster, yeah.
Fucking MySpace and I don't know.
They didn't need a Black Planet page.
Yeah, you can find your.
Mi gente, I'm on Mi gente. Yeah, I'm on. Like, just look me up. Definitely, that's the best way to do it. Just look me up on Google me. Everything's there.
Cool, man. All right, man. It's been great talking with you, man.
Absolutely. So yeah, I will talk to you very soon.
So that was my interview with Sinistarr. Like always, there's more information on the show notes for this episode at freshesthepodcast.com. And on to the Fresh is the Word Fresh pick of the week. This week's pick was actually mentioned by Sinistarr during our interview on this episode. It's the inaugural compilation by Worst Behavior, the music label and event series founded by Anna Morgan and Bell Curve out in New York. As they put it, Worst Behavior pays homage to the sound system culture, and the Worst Behavior Volume 1 compilation is everything that I tend to love about the sort of alternative lanes that dance music and bass music have headed in recent times. Whether it's footwork or halftime drum and bass, there's all these different ideas sprouting out these days from classic genres in electronic music and breathing some new life into it all. Worst Behavior Volume 1 is a taste of those ideas, and it shows that Anna Morgan and Bell Curve have a great vision of things to come. There's more information on the show notes also on Worst Behavior, on where you can listen to the compilation and follow them online. So that's it for another episode of Fresh is the Word. Thank you for listening. And before we get out of here, let me just remind you how you can support the podcast. You can always go to freshasthepodcast.com and share any links that you see on the website and any of your social media platforms. You can also subscribe to Fresh is the Word on a variety of platforms, on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Mixcloud, SoundCloud, Google Play, and TuneIn. Just go to any of those websites, type in Fresh is the Word, and it should come up. And if you'd like to, please rate and review the podcast on any of those platforms, especially Apple Podcasts. It would definitely help out with the growth of the show. And if I do see that there's a review posted, I'll definitely talk about it on air. And you can follow me online at Twitter and Instagram at Kelly Omega Fresh, and on Facebook at facebook.com/KFresh. And you can follow Fresh is the Word on any of the social media platforms, on Twitter at FITW Podcast, on Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, on Facebook at facebook.com/Fresh is the Podcast, and on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Fresh is the Word Podcast. Well, that's it for another episode of Fresh is the Word. Thank you for listening. See you next week. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.